Good evening, guys. This is a video on the factorizing of algebraic expressions. Well, in previous videos you would have learned that A outside B plus or minus C will give us A times B, which is AB, plus or minus AC. So that A is going to multiply to each of the terms inside the bracket. Well, in mathematics, if it's possible to go one way, so going this way would be called, this is expanding groups. Well, if that were true, then going from here, so going from an expression and going backwards is also possible. Not also, it must be possible. That is called factoring. The idea of factoring is called the factorization. We're going back to as if we're going to a multiplication. So let's get straight into it with a few examples. Okay, so let's take a look at example A. We have 10z plus 16. Okay, now how we go about doing this is we want the highest common factor between 10 and 16. Okay, so let me grab some scrap paper now. Let's write down the factors of 10. Well, 10 can be the results of 1 times 10, 2 times 5, and that's it. And 6 is the result of 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. 1 times 6, 2 times 3. Well, which factors are common to both and is the biggest? Well, we have 2 and 2 there. And that seems to be the only common factor between 10 and 6. So we're going to be using 2. So this is going to become 2. And then now this is going, since we came from something like this, we're going to go back to something that looks very familiar, like this. So then now what do we need? 2 times something gets me back to 10. 2 times what gets me to 10? Well, that's 5. Well then, 2 times something gets me to 10z. Well, I need a z in there. It's a positive. Okay, so 2 times what gets me back to 16. Well, 16 divided by 2 is 8. So this is the factorization. In blue is the factorization of that algebraic expression. Let's do a few more examples here. Slide this across just a little bit, make some room. We have, for example, be 15m minus 20n. Same thing. What is the biggest common factor to 15 and 20? Well, I can pick up that it's going to be 5. 5 times what gets me to 15? Well, it's going to be 3, because 5 times 3 gets me to 15. But there's an m there, so we need an m. So now if we take a look, 5 times 3m is 15m, so that works out. 5 times what gets me to negative 20? Well, 5 times 4 gets me to 20, but 5 times negative 4 gets me to negative 20. And I need an n in there, so we'll put an n. There we are. Okay. So we'll just do one more example just to get the hang of things. We'll go with slightly harder. Example C is 24p minus 18q. Okay, so what is the biggest number we can divide 24 and 18 by? Well, I can see the number 6. 6 times what gets me to 24? Well, 6 times 4 gets me to 24. But we need a p there, so p. 6 times what gets me to 18? Well, 6 times 3 is 18. But I need a negative, so it's going to be a negative 3. That's going to be a q in there. Let's keep going now. We can also take out a common negative factor. Okay, by that we mean, so let's take, by that we mean, let's take a look at this idea. Negative 4m plus 6. Okay, so in this one we want to take out a negative factor. Okay, so we know it's going to be negative. What's the biggest number that divides 4 and 6? Well, that's going to be 2, negative 2. It's a little tricky. Negative 2 times what gets me to negative 4? Well, I know 2 times 2 is 4, and this works because negative 2 times positive 2 gets me negative 4. Need a m. Now here's where it gets tricky. 2 times what gets me to 6? Well, we'll begin with 3. Don't worry about the sign just yet. Now let's test it. 2 times negative 2 times positive 3 gets me a negative 6. I'll do that in pencil in case you missed it. So if this were a positive, like so, negative 2 times positive 3 is negative 6. So that's not what we want. So it must be a negative, because negative negative get me a positive. Okay, so now let's go a bit further. Example B, we have negative 8k minus 12m. We're going to take out the biggest common factor. Now, I know that the biggest common factor here is going to be 4, but I'm going to show you what happens if you take out a smaller number. You can do this in steps, actually. So watch. If I take out a common factor of negative 2. Okay, now let's do this. Negative 2 times what gets me to 8? Well, 2 times 4 gets me to 8. Is it going to be negative? Negative 2 times 4, negative 8, so that works. We need a k in there. 2 times what gets me to 12? Well, it's going to be 6. If I make it a positive, will it work? Yes, it will, because negative 2 times positive 6 gets me to negative 12. That's m. Now, if you notice, these 4 and 6 still have a common factor of 2. So what we're going to do is take out another factor of 2. So it's going to be negative 2, right, times 2, like this. Well, I'm going to ignore that negative 2 now. That should be a times, not a dot, sorry. So I'm going to ignore that just for now. That negative 2. I'm going to factorize this again. So 2 times what gets me to 4k? Well, 2 does. 2k does. Okay, so 2 times what gets me to 6m. Well, that's going to be 3m. Now these two numbers are going to multiply with each other, so it's going to be -4 outside 2k plus 3m. So you can do this in steps, but it's always best if you can do it in one go. Okay, let's take a look at just another example now. We'll go with last example. We'll go with here we are. We have -18 minus 24w. So watch what happens if we do it just in one go. What is the biggest number we can take from 18 and 24? Well, I can see 6. I'm going to make this one a -6. This is if the question asks us for it. We can take a -6 as a common factor from here. -6 times what gets me to 18? Well, it's going to be -6 times 3. 6 times 3 is 18, so that works out. And 6 times what gets me to 24? Well, I know 6 4s, double, need a W there. 6 4s are 24. -6 times what? Is it a positive or a negative? Well, negative and a positive make a negative, so it's going to be a positive. And that is the factorization of algebraic expressions using, well, that's only with common factors of numbers. That's numeric common factors.